make you cry no more.
I tell you, we want church.
We won't make you cry no more.
Hi, I'm Valerie J. Coleman, and I am guest host on Keep It Simple, Sir, Saint, Senorita, Sister. A special thanks to Bishop Clarence Norton for this opportunity. And today I have 3 guests with me who are all contributors to my newest anthology, Do It Right the First Time, How to Write, Publish, and Market Your Bestseller. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves so that we can get a feel for who they are and what they do beyond this anthology. Let's start with Bridget. Bridget, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Valerie. So I am a former IT specialist. I am now a storyteller. I'm a Moss Story Slam champion, and I founded a business to help people share their personal stories. So I do workshops. I also do classes on how to share your story. I also have a podcast. I'm also a proud mother and grandmother, and I am so happy to be here. So thank you.
You are welcome. I must say, I absolutely love your story. I love all of your stories in this anthology. We're going to talk more about each individual story going forward. Dr. Nelson, who came all the way here from Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Dr. Nelson Zounlome. I am a former assistant professor at the University of Kentucky. I'm a counseling psychologist, and I'm the founder and CEO of Liberate the Block, which focuses on mental wellness and academic solutions for students of color to help them thrive, not just survive in school. So thank you, and just excited to be here.
Absolutely. We appreciate you making the haul from Pennsylvania via Cincinnati to get here today. And then my long-term friend who I've known for a while, Andrea Foy, who is actually one of my early publishing clients of Higher Power, How to Find, Get, and Keep a Job.
Yeah.
So Andrea, tell us about yourself.
Yes, as Valerie said, we met years ago. She actually published my first book, Higher Power, and we've been friends ever since. I am an author and a speaker. I'm a distinguished Toastmaster with Toastmasters, which I'll talk about a little later. And also, thanks to Valerie, a prolific writer. I've written about 5 books of my own and then been in about 12 anthologies. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But in my day job, I work at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, but I'm also my career and my passion job is writing and speaking.
Absolutely, and you do it quite well, I must say, because you said that you're working on a magazine that's going to be coming out next year. Let's talk a little bit about that magazine.
It'll be a woman's magazine, a woman's lifestyle magazine. I just have so many different interests, which is one of the reasons why I write so many different books. And I like leadership is an interest. I'm trained by John Maxwell as a leadership coach, and personal development, self-care. There's just different things, journaling. Different things I want to talk about. So I thought I would put it together in an online magazine, and the name keeps coming to me as Bliss. Just to, after all we've been through these last couple of years, just have something happy to talk about, and it'll be a magazine, online format, and able to be downloaded or printed or ordered in a physical book as well.
Absolutely. We were talking in the green room. And one of the things you mentioned was that, or I think Bridget mentioned it, that you're going to eventually need contributors.
Correct.
So are you soliciting for contributors now?
Not now. I will be. So once I get it all together and everything, to decide whether it's going to be monthly or quarterly, but I will definitely need contributors and women and men who are interested in some of the things, like I said, that will make us blissful, keep us blissful in all of this time, but definitely want contributors, that people who may not want to be able to write a whole book or a chapter in a book, but could write an article, sort of an elongated blog, so to speak, time to time. But I will definitely need contributors because I can't do it all by myself.
Absolutely. So magazines, books, and Bridget also does storytelling and a blog and a podcast.
Yeah, so the podcast that I host is called Tears, Tides, and Transformation, a podcast about healing. My co-host, Kiana Daniels, and I interview women who have been through stuff in life, and we talk about tips and tools on healing and also how to remain healthy. And I lead workshops on storytelling. The next workshop here in Dayton is going to be in January. And there was something else.
Oh, I don't know. The blog. The blog.
So starting, the blog is going to be coming out soon, so there's going to be a blog on the Lore website around storytelling. And I am also working on a book, thanks to your nudging. It is a daily reader, so it'll be a mantra of daily reflection and some sort of journal prompt or something to think about during the day. So I'm in September, so I've got a couple more months left to go.
So now is lore an abbreviation of folklore?
So yeah, so lore is story. So folklore is more common word the word used to, but lore in general just means story.
Okay, thank you. So if you're looking to, so both of these ladies teach you how to speak, right? Or Toastmasters is a great tool for speaking, and then lore storytelling is a great tool for speaking, because what we all know as authors is that you have to speak to sell your book. So Dr. Nelson, what do you have going on right now?
Oh, so much, Valerie. Yeah, so I, like I mentioned before, I recently left my job as a faculty member to run my business, Liberate the Block, full time. And so in addition to books, we also have online courses. Our flagship course is called Developing a Graduate School Thrive Mindset, which is essentially a crash course, 2-week crash course to really help students take ownership, save time, money, and stress. And it's based on my own experience in graduate school and me being able to graduate 100% debt-free, get a lot of fellowships, and get a job right out of school. We also do consultation, so we work with universities across the country, work with organizations who are focused on making sure that students of color or BIPOC students thrive, not just survive in academia. And then we are also going to be coming out with a podcast. We're going to be coming out with a newsletter. We already have a blog. And next semester, I'm such an academic. Next year, we actually have 2 more books coming out. So one by myself, which is based on my dissertation, which is called Lift As You Climb, the Book of Black Academic Encouragement. And so we had over 100 students, Black students, university students, write and read letters of encouragement to other students based on issues that they face and successfully navigated. And so we have about 80 of those letters in the book. And then also my COO, Dr. Lei Wong, she wrote a book for international students about how to thrive in the U.S. And so we got a lot of stuff going on.
That's nice.
So we're just focused on kind of all of that right now.
Yeah, one of my clients, Dr. Boyka Tway, who was was a retired professor of psychology, he talked about his mecca from going as a student in Africa, Liberia specifically, and then coming to the United States and navigating that. So I'm sure he would find great value in what you've written in that book. And I actually have another client who's talked about her journey of coming from I think Kenya as a young child, and then having to relocate to to America and transition. I guess is very different. Supposedly, so I can't speak to that. I've been here most of my life, not all of it, but most of it. Now you mentioned your online course. What platform are you using to deliver the content?
Yeah, so we're using Thinkific.
Okay.
And so it's a platform that I really like. It's very easy to use, very user friendly. But they also integrate a lot of different web platforms like Zoom, and then you can also have communities in there, so you can post your blogs, your podcasts, everything directly there. And I think it's really nice too, because as we know, if you have Facebook groups or Instagram, right, you don't really own that, and so at any point in time, that can be taken away or something can happen. And so I like that with Thinkific, you really have a lot of control, and you also get to see the students' progress. You get to just see everything, right? So it's a really great platform that I'd highly recommend. I'll
have to look into that. I'm working on creating a course myself. Right now it's still me meeting with the attendees, but what I want to do is make it more self-paced. So I'm recording what I'm doing now, and then I want to put it on the platform so that going forward, I'll just meet with them once a month and say, hey, how you doing? Check in.
That's exactly what I'm doing,
Oh, I love that. Thinkific, I've heard of that one.
I have too.
One of my friends, Dr. Townsend, is looking into using that one as well, maybe. Because online courses are the way to go.
Yes. Yeah,
really, do it once, rinse and repeat.
Exactly.
And then residual income, and you're transforming lives literally across the world on their schedule,
right?
Not ours.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the anthology. That's what we're really here about. Do it right the first time, how to write, publish, and market your bestseller. But I wanted to be sure to mention to the audience that anthologies, as you mentioned before, are a great way to start your journey as an author. It's a lot easier to submit a story into one publication
Yes.
than it is to have to write a full book, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 words, whatever your word count is. And so with this project, my goal was to serve authors. I've been in this business for years, and what I found is I always get the same questions. Well, how do I copyright? Well, how do I come up with my chapter outline? What about a title? Who do I go to for a cover? So I get the same questions over and over again. I was like, you know what? I think it's time to do a book that deals with this. I have compiled a workbook, if you will, 2 workbooks, and they're really more step-by-step guides on what to do. Do this assignment, complete it, move to the next step. But these anthologies, and let me say it's 3 anthologies, it started out as 1, and when I put it all together, it was 500 pages. I got such great stories from so many people. Some I knew directly. I already knew Bridget. I already knew Andrea. I met Dr. Nelson through this process and several other authors, but I couldn't make that 500-page book would have been an encyclopedia. That's too intimidating for anybody. Right. So I broke it into 3 books, and then there's a workbook coming. So Andrea is in the Publisher Market Your Bestseller book, talking about her story, which is Speak to Sale. Now, I know you had some points in there, and your story is on page 105. But let's talk a little bit about some of your points, what it helps people when they're ready to get out there into the world and speak. Some of the points, you had like 7 points. Let's just hit a couple of them first. We talked briefly about it, but talk a little bit about Toastmasters.
Yeah, Toastmasters is an excellent organization for people who are not familiar with or afraid to speak. I'll just put it that way, which is one of the top 2 fears that we have is speaking is one of them. So Toastmasters helps you go and just formulate your speech, you write out your speech, then you work on it, and then you have people who help you, where they will say, you know, this was great, this wasn't great, so that you get an idea that you could get in front of people. Because my biggest fear after I wrote my first book with Val, when people were calling and saying, would you like to speak on the book, do a presentation? And I was like, no, you know, that's not what I want to do. I want you to just read the book, but you have to speak on it and be able to tell people about it, even a little what we call elevator speeches or anything. You just have to be able to talk about it. So people in this quick world, they're going to pick up a book, look at the back of it, but they still won't know what's in it unless you speak. So Toastmasters is an excellent way to go and help you get your thoughts together. It helps you write, helps you be a better writer. And then if you just, especially you go to a club, you tell them I'm working on marketing my book and everything, and I got to get my story together, and people will help you. So it's really good. I went from being totally afraid to speak, not wanting to speak. I went to Toastmasters to buy a book, I thought, to show me how to speak, not to actually speak. And then when I got there and they told me I had to speak, I was disappointed. But I got over it, and then I became a distinguished Toastmaster, which is like top 10% of people actually get there, because it's a long process. So I went from not liking it to loving it. But it's
awesome.
One of my best tips for it.
Speak to Sale. That's actually the best way for me to connect with clients, potential audience, is to speak. So when I do speaking engagements, live or virtual, I can connect with them, because there's something that I learned from Brother Bedford is people will support those people they know, like, and trust. And if you're speaking before them and they get to know your personality and you're interacting and engaging and all the other stuff, because I got a lot of shenanigans when I speak. But with all of that, then they trust you more.
Right.
And then they're willing, and they want to take a piece of you with them. So speaking is my most effective way to sell product or get new people in the door. So I agree with that 100%. Now, one of the things you talk about was seminars and workshops. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, yes, depending on the subject that you have in your book, like one of my first books, my second book after Higher Power was called In the Still of the Night, Personal Safety for Women. So I wanted to get together and talk about tips and talk to women. So we had seminars, and it's another way to sell your book. So you talk about the things that are in the book, you have other women come and talk, in my case, and they were telling stories and sharing tips, and then they were getting together and getting to know each other. And seminars and workshops are just an excellent way to go ahead and sell your book, because people actually get to see it. They get to practical application. They see that it's not just a book that full of something they can't relate to, but then they see in the book that they can relate to it and learn from it. So I think that's another excellent way to do. And you can do your own or get together with people. And so seminars and workshops are excellent, 3 or 4 hours, a whole day. You even could put conferences together with different authors, several multi-days. So that's another good way to get your book out and get information from people.
Absolutely. Let me just clarify that an anthology is a collection of short stories, either from a lot of different people or the same person, based on a specific theme. Because I've had people say, well, what? Like an anthology. So it's a compilation. Like if you think about a CD, there may be, well, I guess we don't do CDs anymore, but 15, 20 songs on one project. It's a compilation. It may be one artist or multiple artists. Same thing with an anthology. So I got some great stories. Bridget is a storyteller, and I remember stories that she taught at, well, not taught, but communicated at Dr. Townsend's Sister to Sister event, the story about the hitchhiker, which was so powerful. Bridget tells stories in a way that'll make you be like, oh my gosh, that was so moving. And in this book, you're in the Write Your Bestseller, the first of the 3 books in the series. You tell a story. You start out by telling a story about an experience with your grandmother. Such a powerful story, and how you break the story down and help explain how you told the story, why you told the story the way you told it, and identified some strategies for aspiring writers. Because what I find with a lot of people is they have a bunch of ideas, a bunch of, I don't know what to do. I have all these ideas in my head. Which one do I do first? How do I figure out which is the most important story? And you mentioned a few things in your story that will help people better understand that. And one of the things was focus on the theme. So tell us a little bit about focusing on the theme.
So when we tell stories organically, we tend to start somewhere and then we trail off and then we say, oh, I forgot to tell you this. And then we go back and it's all over the place. When you are crafting a story, when you're going to write a story, you want it to have a beginning, a middle, and end. You want to make sure that everybody has the information they need, and then focus on a specific instance that something happened. But then it is, what do you leave in and what do you take out of the story? And that's where the theme is really important. So understanding, what do I want my readers or my listeners to get from what I'm telling them? What do I want them to remember? And that's your theme. You don't have to say the theme. Sometimes you do. You might say, hey, I'm going to tell you a story about XYZ, or at the very end, I want you to remember some sort of call to action. But a lot of times, it's just what the focus is going to be. It's kind of like the guardrails to stay in, what descriptions you're going to keep in there, what characters you're going to include and not. Otherwise, you're not clear on what you want the readers to get out of your story. So that's the theme. And
that's a valid point, to stay focused, because I had a young lady who wanted me to edit her manuscript, and when she sent it to me, now this is 8.5 by 11, and I edit on paper, so she sent 400 pages. And same sound I made, wait a minute. And so I started going through the story, and one thing I realized with her very quickly, she was a highly educated woman, and she wrote very highly educated words. I'm pretty smart. So I had to pull out a dictionary. I was like, I don't know, what does this 7-syllable word mean? So I had to pull out a dictionary, which is not good for your readers. You have to be aware of who your audience is. But the other thing that I tried to explain to her was that she had 7 main themes going on in her story, and it was that's why it was 400 pages. So if you're familiar with Greek mythology, there was something called the tetrahedron. It was a 7-headed creature. And I said, dear, I need you to cut the head off of 5 of those creatures.
Oh, wow.
And she said, but I can't, I have to tell my story. But the thing was, she was telling her life story. She, just like all of us, we've had life experiences, but you can't tell it all. So you have to pick something that you want to focus on. Do you want to focus on your childhood? And for her instance, I think there was some childhood assault. Do you want to focus on the fact, that your business and your career and how you move forward? Do you want to talk about your domestic violence, your marriage?
My goodness.
Whatever it is you're going to talk about, you have to be focused on that theme. And you may have some tributaries, if you will, that come off to the side just to add a little flour to it. But you still have to stay focused and within those guardrails. Otherwise, you confuse your readers.
Right.
And if they see 400 pages in 8.5 by 11, it's going to be 800 pages in book size.
Goodness.
I'm not.
No.
I edited the whole thing because she paid me. but I would never have read it.
No.
And so you want to be mindful of that as you're writing a book. That's good. Stay focused.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then one of the other things you talked about as a way to write your story was what happened first. Tell us about what happened first.
So I actually really love this technique. So the idea of trying to come up with a story to tell or just something to write, firsts are often a really great way to start. So I call it following the memory trail. So if you start with, if I ask you the question, can you tell me about your first interview? Your first interview might not have been that exciting, but as soon as I ask you that question, you're going to think of an interview that's a great story. So by asking the first questions, tell me about, the first vacation you took without your parents or something like that. It might not be about that, but the memory trail will take you to a story that you're like, oh, let me tell you about that vacation, and you have a story. So the first, it's not actually about the first, it's about what comes up whenever I ask you that question.
That's a good point. So like a writing prompt or a thought starter.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Then you also included the story arc.
Yes.
And you mentioned that earlier about the middle, the middle. I guess you can start in the middle.
You can start in the middle.
For theatrical purposes.
Exactly. So for a story, especially a short story, you want to focus on one particular moment. It's what happened in that moment. And then you want to frame it with the exposition, which is the beginning, which is everything that your listener, your reader needs to know before the moment happened. And then there's some sort of inciting incident that pulls your reader in. This happened, and they're like, oh, now I need to know what happens next. You take them on a journey, and that's the middle. That's the meat of the story. And then there's some sort of climax. And after that is the resolution. So the end is the resolution. And you want to be your leaders to know, or your readers to know that you're okay, or whatever happened was okay. So that's kind of the main part of the story arc. But and it's an important point when you're telling a story or you're writing a story. You can start with the middle. I like to say you can start with, before me were two doors, and whichever one I choose, I knew my life would forever be changed. But now you want to know all that, what happened. But you also have to then backtrack. So first draft should always be in the order of things happened, the timeline version, so that you know what you need to keep in and what you need to take out. But for entertainment, you may start at the beginning and then backtrack and include the information the readers need to get to where you started with.
Absolutely. They do that. When you said, I have two doors, I went straight to the Matrix.
Yes.
The blue pill or the red pill. But that's a valid point, especially when people are telling their life story. You don't want to go from birth, then I was 1, then I was 2, and then, and now that I'm 50, blah, blah, blah. But I always tell my clients who come to me wanting to write their memoirs, what was that pivotal moment, that crisis, that situation that made you change your thinking, change your strategy, change the people in your circle? What happened that was like, oh my gosh, this is it for me? That there has to be some life-turning moment. And they would always say, oh, well, that's what we need to start with. So one young lady was writing her story, and it was, I forget how she started, but I encouraged her to move to the part where she comes home and her house is in disarray, and they are coming. The police are coming to take her and her sibling. Well, we want to start there, and then figure out how we built up to that, and then how you process that going forward. So yeah. And then I'm a movie person, so I like the movies that start at the end and somebody's laying there and you're like, oh, how'd that happen? And then they take you back. So that's good. You don't have to start at the beginning in the finished product, but in the beginning, start with the beginning.
So that you know what you're going to keep in and you're going to take out, right? So a really good story, who you are or who the main character is at the end is different than who they were at the beginning. So there's focusing on the change between who they were before and who they are after. And so you want to make sure you get all those details, and then you can switch it up.
That's good to know. All right, Dr. Nelson.
Yes.
And he is a real doctor with a PhD, let me say that. That's important. That's why I'm calling you Dr. Nelson, PhD. Yes, I applaud you, sir. PhD. Yes. Okay, so Dr. Nelson, your story was 5 writing tips for self-care and success. And you started out talking about your process of writing your first book. This is your first book, Letters to My Sisters and Brothers, correct?
Yep.
All right. And you talked about your journey of writing that book, and then you shared some things that you learned through the process that would help aspiring authors get there as well. Now, your story is in the writing book on page 103. I forgot to mention that Bridget is also in the writing book on page 61. And I have stories in all the books, of course. But tell us about the self-affirmations.
Yeah, so, for me, I wrote this book during the pandemic, during spring of 2020, right? So we watched Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, so many other people murdered, right? We saw COVID-19 ravishing the nation, but more in particular, Black and brown communities disproportionately. And so at that time, I was still in school working on my dissertation, and I found myself really depressed. I found myself really, just not knowing what to do, wondering my place in life, wondering if I should be doing what I was doing. And so this book was really the product of that, right? And so when you ask about self-affirmations, that's, something that I started each day with when I was writing this book is, I am perfectly poised to write this book, right? And people need to hear what I have to say, and these voices and these stories need to be shared, right? And so this book, really inspired me in its creation, and that affirmation was something that became a self-healing process for me in creating this book, right? And in the book, I should mention, it's a compilation of over 165 students shared different advice that they have. Students of color in universities shared advice that they have for other students, right? So, knowing yourself, speaking up, embracing your identities, right? And I also have activities and coloring book pages for self-care, right? And so it was really about having a comprehensive piece for myself, but I wanted to share with others that, how do we get through this tough time? And how do we create something that really speaks to our experiences that are often not really showcased in a way that might not be as humanizing. And so, the affirmations in this book, the advice that the students had, helped me. And so,
So your first book was an anthology.
Of sorts.
Yeah. And is this the Do It Right the First Time? Is this your second book, or?
Yeah, that's what would be my second.
Okay, so you're into anthologies, all right. But you compiled that one.
Right.
I know that takes a lot of work. Yes. And then this is something that you also mentioned is draw on community strength. And I think that's important in what all of us do, draw on community strength. But expound on that for us.
Yeah, so my community, I'm only here because of my community, right? And so I like to tell people, so my family is originally from Benin, West Africa, came here to the US in '92, born and raised in South Bend, Indiana, grew up in public housing, right? Single parent household, things like that. And so, we struggled, but we always had love. We always had joy, right? We always had someone to come by and, to hang out, or, Christmas presents, food, right? Like everything was shared, everything was communal. And I took that with me when I went to school. And so when writing this book, I really thought about, wow, thinking back to, Nelson at 10 or Nelson at, 15 or whatnot, what would he have needed, right? And that community strength, thinking about all the love that has been poured upon me and shown my whole life, that's the strength that I drew upon to write and compile and to produce this book, right? And so, my community and my family and my friends really give me that strength and that courage to do this, right? Because being an author, putting your story out there, it's a big deal, right? It's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort, but it's really scary, to be able to say, I wrote this and I published it, so you could always go back and see, like, you misspelled that, you did this, or I don't like your story, right? You open yourself up to critique in a way. And so drawing on my community strength allowed me to really just say, you know what? I feel like I benefited from doing this. I think other people can. And so let me put it out there.
So Andrea, how have you used community in your speaking or your books? How has community benefited you?
Pretty much the same as Dr. Nelson has said. Just the support and how you grew up and the love and everything gives you the confidence, really, in a way, to express yourself. So I just felt like I came from a family, my mother was a teacher, and I just came from a family where expression of yourself, vocalizing and everything was always accepted. So it just felt like when I just started writing at a young age, writing when in high school and as we were teenagers, you always had the diaries. We used to call them diaries back then. They're now journals. But just writing. And then even in my high school environment, the teachers would be like, you should be writing. You should be writing. But so the community that I have found has been, school community and family community has been very accepting and very encouraging, and that's how I pretty much have used community to give back from what I felt when I was growing up and forming my identity as a writer.
Thank you. And Bridget, now I know you create a whole community with your storytellers. Tell us a little bit about that process of building that community.
So the workshops that I do here in Dayton that are 4-week workshops, they're limited to 8 people, and the graduation is an onstage event. So anywhere between 4 and 8 people sit down and tell personal stories to one another for 4 weeks. By the time they get on stage, a lot of them for the first time being on stage, they have this group that a little community that they're getting on stage and doing this thing together for the first time, which is incredible. And then what happens is that, friendships are formed, and a little storytelling community is created. And I say this every time, every workshop, it's like the right people come together for that workshop. It's like, divinity puts the right people in the right room. And so it's been incredible. I started storytelling on stage personally as a part of my healing process. And so a lot of people go through these workshops because they have some story that needs to come out of them. And it's just incredible to be the witness for that process.
Very good. That sounds a little bit like ministry, Bridget. I don't know.
It does.
Because telling your story, especially those things that are deep-rooted or can be very vulnerable or make you very vulnerable, but that transparency, if you transition that into a book when you have that breakthrough, that healing that you've gone through can really help somebody else. And I think that's what a lot of us have done in our messages, is taken our personal journey, like you said, you did it for healing for yourself, put it in a book, and then you can help other people have that transformation. That's my whole purpose with my company. I mean, my company is Pen of the Writer, which is based off of Judges 5:14. And in that scripture, it talks about the different tribes of the children of Israel who are going to battle against the Philistines. And the last tribe mentioned was the tribe of Zebulun. Now, one thing I know about the tribe and them fighting the Philistines is that they were not fighting with ink pens and doing hand-to-hand combat with these 9-foot giants, right? So when I did some study, went back into the Hebrew meaning, the original Hebrew meaning, I found that they were doing hand-to-hand combat with sticks and staffs. Right? So then that worked for me for Pen of the Writer, because I feel like I'm doing hand-to-hand combat with the enemy. All my books are inspirational. All my books are clean. All my books are encouraging and empowering. And I use my message and the message of my clients to serve other people. And the thing about book publishing is it's a multiplicative. It's exponential, right? I write one book. Well, we've written 3 books collectively. Well, however many people buy these books, that's more people who are now into the book business or better understanding or making sound decisions and not wasting money. That was my biggest thing, is do it right the first time so you don't get frustrated. You don't spend too much time. You don't listen to the wrong people, and you don't waste money, because there are people out there who tell you stuff. And I'm on Facebook. I'm a Facebook troll. I'm like, ooh, that's not right.
She does.
That's, one young lady posted, well, I'm writing a children's book, and what do I do with my illustrator? Does my illustrator pick the size of the image, or do I tell her the size? And somebody said, yeah, just let the illustrator pick. No, you don't. Because if you do that, and then you go to upload it to one of the platforms, and it's the wrong size, it's not going to work. Or it's going to be jacked up. You can say, they messed up. No, your illustrator messed up. You messed up by letting your illustrator run your project. So you have to be clear on that. We don't really discuss children's books in this anthology, but it's important to understand there are protocols, procedures, processes, the right people to talk to. Publishing is a lot of steps. It's a lot. Now, you can go on Kindle, kdp.com, .amazon.com, push the button and submit, and you'll be a published author amongst the 32 bazillion million that are already on there, but you might not sell a book. You'll get bad reviews, right? Or you're too embarrassed. I've worked with people who, they put their books out there, they were so embarrassed, they took them back down and then started over. Val, can you help me? Yeah, okay, this is, we got a lot of work to do. But that's the right thing to do once you already got it out there. But we want to keep people from making those mistakes. Do it right the first time so you can save that money, save that heartache. And when we're talking about community and teams, I encourage my clients to actually get a group of people, and I suggest 5 to 7. and call them their power team. Pen of the writer, you take the letters and pen of the writer, you get the word power. So this power team are people who are going to hold you accountable. They're going to support you, they're going to encourage you, and they're going to call you and say, get up out the bed and finish this book, right? But then they'll give feedback. I don't like that cover, I like this cover. I don't like that image, I like this image. You should have said this, you forgot to say that, change that. You know, and so they become your sounding board, your first line of defense before you then start dealing with professional editors. Because you got to have professional editors. Yeah. Do you edit people's stories for them to actually have in print when they're going through the process? You're kind of editing, but not in print.
No, so I don't edit in print. I suggest people get somebody who is better at that. I have a bachelor's in science, not in
Literary science.
yeah. So and I have not written. So I suggest that people get somebody. I can help to come up with the idea. So a good example is my son's a senior in high school, and some of his friends are trying to figure out what to write their college essays about. I can sit down and help you come up with a story, but you should work with your English teacher to put that in the format that the schools require. So yes, so I can help you to craft the story, but for writing, somebody else should help with that.
Well, and I'm glad you said that, because that is a very different profession and a different mindset.
It is.
Editing is very left brain. I'm sure crafting the storytelling is very right brain. The creativity, the intuition, the feelings, the emotions. When you get into editing, that's more left brain. So if you're trying to craft the story and edit at the same time, you're going to have issues. I tell my clients, a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways. Either write or edit. Don't do both, right? That's backspacing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Backspacing, erasing, deleting, scratching through, all that is editing.
Right.
So when it comes to writing, which several of the people mentioned in the writing book, is just write. Free write.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't worry about if it works or doesn't work.
Yes.
Just write. You can always go back and take it out. Especially now, you know, when I got started, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but we had typewriters.
Right.
And it's like if you type it out, then you got to use the whiteout and all the Exacto tape and all that other stuff. We don't have that issue anymore, so it's a lot easier to write your stories and get it out there.
And related to that, I would say something, you know, everything that you were saying, I was writing, I was like, no, I don't like that. And it was taking me forever. And so something that I started doing is just talk to text, right? And so a lot of, you know, software, Word, all that stuff, right? You could do it into your phone, voice memos. There's a lot of software now that are inexpensive that would transcribe the whole thing for you. And so when I switched to that, not only was it more powerful because, you know, it's like how I think it, it's how I lived it, but it also reduced that barrier of me constantly looking at what I had written and like being very critical of that. And so that's something that really helped me, and I'd encourage other people to do that as well.
Yeah, that's a great tool. That dictation, either get a recorder or, like you said, your smartphones now have all kind of technology. Just make sure you back it up.
Yes.
Right? Because one company recently got rid of their virtual talk app and didn't tell anybody. Just wake up one day and it was gone. So all my stuff was gone.
Oh no.
So make sure you back it up. But that digital recording makes a difference. I never mentioned the Conversations book, but the third book in the anthology is Conversations with Marketing Experts, where I interviewed 9 experts and 6-figure and 7-figure income earners and how to get media attention. One of the participants, persons I interviewed, Suham Hammond, was on the Steve Harvey show, the TV show, not once, but twice.
My goodness.
So she talks about how she landed that. There's Andrea Bell Kearney talks about how she launched her podcast and how she's monetizing her podcast. And she talks about the different platforms and which one is better based on where you are and what you need. Vanessa Miller-Pierce, who I know you know Vanessa, who started in Dayton and now she lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. She talked about how do you land publishing deals. She right now, I think she writes for 5 different traditional publishing houses, which means they pay her to write, right? And she's got 50 or 51 novels out there now.
My goodness.
She earns her living as an author, full-time author. So it's much to be said about that. But when you mentioned transcription, I thought about that book because when I interviewed everyone, I did 1-hour interviews. And the 1 hour interviews, each interview ended up being about 13,000, 14,000 words.
Wow.
I had 9 of them. We're talking about the book. Initially, that was a whole encyclopedia.
Yeah, exactly.
So once I went in and edited and modified, I got each story down to about 4,000 or 5,000 words, which is still a lot. So that's why it's a standalone book. But it's my conversations with them, asking them, how did you do what you do? What platforms do you use? How do you get from where you were to where you are? So all of the books are filled with resources, like some of the strategies that you mentioned and websites that you've mentioned. I know Bridget mentioned a couple of websites, themoth.org. I put those in there. So there's in the back of the book, there's a whole resource chapter that gives you access to the different tools that people have used to write, publish, or market their bestseller. So I want it to be an all-in resource, and I love the way the book is going and the people that we're going to serve with it. So
Yes.
now let me ask you, what was your inspiration initially for writing your first book, Andrea?
The first Higher Power?
Yes, yeah, that one.
The one that you published?
that I published.
Yes, okay. My inspiration, and it's as simple as this for people when they're thinking about writing and they're thinking it has to be really deep. I went to get a second job, a holiday job. And when I walked in, and I was dressed in a suit, even though it was at a retail store, and I looked around and there was a young lady sitting there, and she was wearing shorts and t-shirt and tennis shoes. And I knew then that, you know, young lady of color, I was like, she's not going to get this job. Even though it's a retail store, I just knew the way she looked. And long story short, you know, for weeks afterwards, I kept thinking, walking around thinking to myself, you know, these people, these young kids don't know. They don't know that you don't show up that way to an interview. And I just kept thinking it, just kept getting in my head. And then my mom finally said, why don't you just write this down? Because you're, you know, she was like a muse in a way. And I was thinking that young teenagers and children, they need to know how to get that first job and how to act when they're on the job, the importance of being on time and all the things that you need to know. And so I just put it into a book. I was already full-time employed. I was just doing this as a second job. And when I walked in, because I treated that interview as the first job, as the same way I would treat it, the retail job was the same way I would treat my day job. So that's how I wrote the book, and the rest is history.
So you were triggered
Yes,
by an experience.
correct. Yes,
And same
yes.
with you, Dr. Nelson, you were triggered by life experiences to write that book. Now, I know, Bridget, you were invited to be in the anthology, but your trigger for this new book that you're working on, which is your first published work, is this anthology.
It is.
So the book that you're working on, what was your inspiration, your trigger for that?
So there's a daily reader that I personally use. It's called The Book of Awakening by Mark Nepo. And he wrote it when he was dying of cancer, actually. He ended up surviving, but he wasn't expected to survive. And so he wrote this book from a place of like looking back on his life. And it has been pretty impactful for me. And I've been journaling for years. So I have lots of writing over very many years. And so the inspiration of this book that I use on a daily basis and all of this writing, I thought, let's put it together. So that's where that's come from.
And your audience for that book you identify as?
So it would be primarily women, because that's my perspective. Again, Mark Nepo's book is very powerful, but it's written by a man, and so there's some nuances to writing from a female perspective that has a slightly different focus.
And you said it's a 365-day.
It is.
Okay. And it's going to have journaling.
So every day will have some sort of mantra and a reflection related to that mantra, and then a to-do. And the to-do might be a journal prompt. It might be just for today, being curiosity. So it's a way to start your day with a positive focus and to get your mind going.
That's good. And being simple, manageable actions as opposed to 365.
Exactly.
Go do this.
Yes.
One a day and make it more manageable, and then they have that comeback experience. Very good. I like that.
I do too.
Good idea. Do you have an idea of when you expect that to be?
So my goal is mid next year. So I'm hoping to have my first initial edit done before the end of this year, so then I can move into. But I've never done this before, so Valerie, I don't know. You're probably going, oh yeah. I'm hoping mid next year. That's
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Well, one thing I will say, there's different levels of editing. So you want to start with what you said you were doing before, the self-edit. That's when you go in and do it yourself and but that's after you write. So write first and then go back and edit.
Yes.
Then have your power team review it. And I encourage my clients, if, pre-COVID, bring everybody together if that's an option. Feed your team, and then you read the book out loud. Take turns reading it out loud. Because the whole storytelling and the speaking thing makes a big difference, and you hear things differently when you speak them out.
Yes.
Right.
And what you'll find is there are things that they may say that aren't on the paper. And if you're writing a novel and your readers start getting into the character, they'll start doing stuff in their body and all the nonverbal. Like, oh, she would roll her eyes. Right? And so that really helps, but it helps to flesh out the story as well. So I encourage them to do that. Then after that, you have professional editors that you need to hire and pay. The first being a developmental editor or a writing coach. They do the highest level. They spend the most time. They delve most into the manuscript. They cost the most money, but they are essential in making sure your story is clear and concise, your characters are believable, it all makes sense and it flows together. Then there would be the line edit or the copy edit, one and the same. And what that person does is check for stats and facts, make sure you're using the right information. One author, and I'm not going to say her name because she'll be like, no, you didn't put that out there. She was from Dayton, and she said they were driving down the Bird. And I said, what's the Bird? Gettysburg. I said, no, it's Berg.
Right.
You are not Bird.
Right.
Wow. And then another thing, she was driving in the Lincoln Escalade. No.
Right, little
Even
things
though
like
this is
that.
fiction.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
That's not the case.
Right, people would
She
still.
climbed up the stairs.
Yes.
STARES. No, she didn't do that.
Right.
So you need that line copy editor will catch those kind of things. And then last is the proofreader. And the proofreader will catch the minute things that most people will miss. In my novel, The Forbidden Secrets of the Goodie Box, my character, who's named Brian through the whole book, became Brain. The last 6 instances I used it was Brain. Microsoft Word didn't catch it because brain is a word. It was capitalized, so I didn't catch it. And then we have this phenomenon in our brain where if the first letter's in this place, the last letter's in this place, all the letters in the middle can be jumbled and you'll still read it.
Right.
She caught that.
Right.
And then another thing she caught, now I used to be a math teacher, college math teacher, and when they took make-up exams, it was make-up. Well, when I said that she put on her makeup, I put the hyphen in there.
Okay.
You know, that hyphen doesn't go in there. I go, oh, well, I didn't know. And for math, it does. So she caught those kind of things. And even though most people may not notice that or catch that, you don't want to present your book and have somebody who does catch it email you and say, you got a mistake on this page.
Right.
Or worse yet, it's something horrible, and then they blast you on social media.
Oh my goodness.
Or
Or it's
So
just,
do it right the first time.
or you just remember, years ago before I started writing, I went to a vendor event and I bought a young man's book, and in the book for clothes, CLOTHES, he spelled it cloths. So the whole time in the book, I couldn't finish the book because I kept seeing that, and it drove me. I couldn't even, I just put it down. I was like, well, I supported him, book $10 or whatever, but I'll never forget that. And I never got a chance to see him again, so it wasn't like, and you're not going to go on social media or anything, or I wouldn't, to let him know. But I still, to this day, as you see, 15 years later, remember that book because of that, very big error that he kept talking about. That's the thing. He mentioned it several times. One time, your brain would just like skip over it, but then he just kept talking about clothes, and it was spelled cloths, and you just something like that. Now nowadays he would probably catch it, but that was like 10 or 15 years ago, even before all the technology advances and everything that we have. But it makes a big difference.
But he probably didn't have an editor because of
the
team or the proofreader.
Somebody would have caught that. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. But it was
because the other part of that is because you didn't finish it, you didn't like it, you're not going to tell anybody else to go buy it.
Right, exactly.
And so we have to be very clear that what we put out there, if we put it out in excellence and it causes transformation, people can read. I am an avid, I don't edit manuscripts unless I'm publishing them. But whenever I read, I have a red pen and I'm marking
right.
all kinds of books. I'm like,
right.
ooh. I can't get over, and I have a lot of people who I know who do the same thing. You don't want readers to read your book and be like, I can't finish it.
Exactly.
Because this is a mess. I talked to a gentleman one time, and I bought his book, supporting, bought two books, one for me and one for my son, because it was powerful. I thought it was powerful. I couldn't read I couldn't read the first chapter. It was full of, and I said, sir, I called him because I had his number. Did you publish this without an editor? Because you might want to pull it off of Amazon. Well, I paid a lot of money to an editor, and I'm like,
they did not do anything.
Either she didn't know what she was doing, or he didn't implement the things that she suggested. Or I don't know. It was a mess. I said, well, she got your money. Because I could have done a whole lot more than what she get. So you want to make sure that you present yourself in excellence. That's one of the most important things. Now, I do want to say that I am hosting an in-person event, my first one since COVID.
Oh my goodness.
I know, right? Because I'm in several high-risk categories, and I got issues with the cooties. But what I'm doing is December the 2nd, I'm doing an event here in Dayton, the Do It Right the First Time, Write Your Bestseller One Day Intensive. Yeah, so I invite people to go to the website, penofthewriter.com, and go to my events page, and you can see about the event. But we're going to really take those ideas and put them on paper. Decide which one is the right one. Come up with some chapter outline to help you flesh out. And we're going to do some writing so that when you leave, you're going to have something that you can start with to get you going, to get that momentum going. Because sometimes it just takes a little spark, just ignite.
Right. And I can vouch for your events. I've been to how many of them? A lot of them. Oh my gosh! When I first started, every time she had an event, I was right there. So I went to all of them, and they all. Well, how many books later? So I guess they worked.
Absolutely, and that's the whole thing is taking the initiative. Because 81% of people say they want to write a book. But most of them never do it. It's like a pie in the sky bucket list dream. We'll take it off the bucket list
and do it.
And let's do it.
Right.
And here's how we can do this
and do
thing.
it right the first time.
Do it right the first time. Absolutely. So
yes. And don't put it back in the drawer.
Don't put it back in the drawer. Don't be concerned about my family might be afraid, or it might be embarrassing to them, or will I be sued? Those are all the questions I hear, and I tell people all the time, those are valid concerns. However, let me tell you how we can work past that, because all that is a trick of the enemy trying to keep you from telling your story because somebody needs what you have to say. The earth is growing for the manifestation of your gift. And as long as you keep it on the inside, it never makes it to the outside. I think Dr. Miles Monroe was the one who said that the richest place in the world is a graveyard. Because people die with all this treasure, all this gift in them, and it never manifests. So here we have an opportunity to not only get this stuff out of us. For some people, it is a torturous thing.
It is.
Get this out. I'm just going to go.
It is.
To get this stuff out of you to help other people, but then to position you for success. Generate revenue, speaking engagements, online courses, master storytellers on TEDx. Yes, we can't forget to mention that Bridget is not just teaching people; she's teaching people how to get onto TEDx, right? And get on and master through their storytelling, right? How to create their pitch and get out there. I think all that's phenomenal. And Andrea out there telling the world about how to stay safe. When she's had some great stories about some of the things she experienced as a flight attendant. Yes, and then your whole Prince situation.
Yes, I did my memoir.
Prince, right?
Yes,
the anthology. One was an anthology. So she's got a whole. You go to her Amazon page. How many books you got? 20.
With books and anthologies, together. Not all just mine,
not
but
just
yes.
5 that are yours. But that's great. Anthologies are a great way to generate exposure. I've got Dr. LaTanya Branham is in several Chicken Soup for the Soul.
That was
they pay
the best
you to be
one.
in those books, but she said more importantly, because it's not like they pay you bazillions, but she gets to buy the books that she can sell out at events, and there's a prestige with being in Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Yes.
And then the books are literally across the world.
Exactly.
So with her contact information in there, people have reached out to her for different things relative to the stories that she's told. So anthologies are a great way to launch your blog, your speaking, your other books, your message, build your brand and get the word out there. So before we close, I just want each of you to just kind of go around and give one piece of advice to an aspiring author. And Andrea, since I'm looking at you, we're going to start with you. What would be your one piece of advice for a new author?
As we have been saying, to go ahead and just do it. I have to tell you, Vanessa Miller Pierce was the one that started me. I went to her book signing, and I told her I was an author, and she opened up her book and she wrote, "Just Do It." Right, and really because of her, that's how I met Valerie, and I'm here today. So her advice to me is what I will pass on to other people. Just do it, get it out.
Absolutely, that's good stuff. Bridget, what about you?
So I would say that all of us have stories, and your story is important. And oftentimes we feel like, who am I, and what do I have? But the truth is, you have an experience and wealth of information and knowledge and personal experience that could help somebody else. And I'm testament. I'm an IT person, right? Like I would never say I'm a writer. But the truth is, I have stories and I have knowledge to share, and with the right support system, right? So get it out, and then get your support system, right? There are people who specialize in taking the raw material and making it the finished product. So get started.
Absolutely. So just write.
Right.
Tell your story. Dr. Nelson.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to tie it together. So as a psychologist, I'll talk about my tip is more about like the mental health aspect, right? And so, there's confidence that comes from that. There's healing, right? There's vulnerability, but just being able to say, right, what is on your mind or on your heart or on your spirit, and putting that out there for yourself and for others really is transformational, right? And something that I want to say is about my second book, but also my first book is, it allowed me to express parts of my struggles or my time that I never said before, and to connect with friends and family in a way that, I didn't know how to say. Well, I was experiencing a lot of racism at school, right? But I was the one who made it out of the project. So, and so I'm talking to my brother, I'm talking to my mom about stuff that I'd never really spoken to them about in detail. And they're sitting there like, wow, and we're able to have that conversation. And so it's really brought so much of my family and my friends together to talk about not only what happened to me, but what was happening to them at that time, right? And so it can really not only heal yourself, but your friends, your family, your community, obviously make money, obviously, be able to set you up for success, but there's just so many benefits. So yeah, please start now. Please, share your story. And there's so much benefit for you and for others.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And my advice would be to don't try to go it alone. Now, writing is a solo project. You can write in a group, a community of people, but if you're writing your story, you got to do that alone. But bring in other people to assist you, whether it's someone who can be your sounding board, your muse, as you said, or your community of supporters, or your people who come along and share their information to kind of give you new insight into what you're writing. So don't try to go this alone. And more importantly, when it comes to the publishing part, writing is somewhat solo. When it comes to publishing and marketing, do not step out there by yourself. It's too many hurdles, too many pitfalls, too many occasions for people to take your money, steal your dreams, right? The fiery darts, kill, steal, and destroy. And that's what can happen if you don't go out there knowledgeable of what your options are, and without skipping steps and not trying to cut corners. You want to do it right the first time, so that you do have professional editing. You have a professional cover. I've seen covers that people look like they really literally did it themselves. I'm like, did you try that with a, yeah, I did. I think we can't do that. So there's certain things that need to happen. Even pricing. All that plays into how effectively your book sells, how well it's marketed, and how serious people take you in the business. So I would say don't go it alone. Contact me if you want mentoring for writing and publishing, or marketing and publishing more so. And then Bridget does storytelling, so if you need help crafting your story, contact her for that. If you want to learn about speaking and getting the word out, you can contact Andrea about that, and Dr. Nelson if you're looking at the intellectual side. Or you want to assess your self-care initiatives, contact Dr. Nelson. So there's but all that comes together to flesh out a powerful story in this powerful anthology. So I thank you all for being here. I appreciate the fact that you made the Mecca, made the journey, made the trip, come all the way across the ocean to get here to be a part of this message, because people need to know you can write a book.
Right.
You can publish a book, and it's doable. And we want you to do it right the first time. Do it in excellence. Minimize your expenses and do it right the first time.
Correct.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of this KISS episode. We are so glad glad that you tuned in today. I thank Bishop Clarence Norton for letting me be a guest host today, and I'm sure I'll probably come back sometimes.
Sounds good. Yes, I think so. I think so.
Much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
For the anthology. Thank you.
You are welcome.
Thank you.
I am tickled pink.